Hey everybody, it's AJ Pasciuti, author of Darkhorse. If you'll bear with me just 1 second, we're kind of getting some things set up here, so I have to go over to Instagram and start the show. I don't know how, forgive me. Pin comment. Okay, well, that was an exercise in my technological skills. Welcome back, everyone. So my name's AJ Pasciuti. I'm the author of Darkhorse, Harnessing Hidden Potential in War and Life, and this is my Talk Shop Live. So I see some people joining the chat here. I can see you guys joining. I really appreciate you guys just taking the time to sit with me, and I look forward to answering a number of questions as we kind of go through this. But I wanted to start while everyone's kind of settling in with really, I think, why I wrote Darkhorse. Darkhorse for me was a really personal journey. Where it started was with actually a guy by the name of Ryan Fugit. So I used to be on his podcast, and as many people recognize, he was the host of Combat Story, and he had started in 2020 and continued on with for a number of years. Asked me to be a guest on the show, and I just really connected with him through that process. And at the very end of the show, we turned off the microphone, and he said, pretty plain to me, he's like, "Hey, man, I really think that you need to write this story down." And he says, "I've never said this to anybody, on all the people that he had interviewed at that point." And so we started talking about it, and Ryan was a real guiding light behind that. He and I had coffee for a couple of different occasions after that as well. And so we went from that journey to the next, and he associated and brought me in contact with Neil McGinnis, who was the co-author of Darkhorse. And from there on, we kind of just started this journey. And it's been a really, really fun, ride for the last 2 years. But I have all of the folks at Combat Story to thank for also being here, but also being part of the journey throughout that. So with that, I'll take a second. I'll look for any kind of comments that I see popping up here in the chat. And then if not, I'll continue on with the story of how we started Darkhorse and what that looked like as we went through it. I do see Kyle, a name that I recognize from a fellow Marine from a long time ago. Kyle, thanks for being here, my friend. I see the flame emoji. I appreciate that. I didn't want to be sitting in this room all by myself, just yammering on for an hour. I'm glad to know that someone else out there is sitting with me. I appreciate it, my friend. Second, guys. Sorry, my tech has hit me again. Gina Lee, good afternoon. Great to see you. Thanks for showing up. I do appreciate it. Semper Gummy. Good to see that. Yeah, Semper Gumby. You guys are all watching me try to figure out a computer over here. Excuse me one second. I had to fix some audio. Noise cancellation off. Yep. All right, cool. We had to do some settings in there. Okay. Gina Lee, thanks so much so the theme of the book as a whole is that, so Darkhorse is kind of three things. So first, it's a military memoir where we cover a lot of combat, a lot of kind of growing up in the military, a lot of service inside of that. I think the second point for me is it was also kind of a coming of age story. I tried to write a book that was capturing a generation. I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened, and decided to join the Marine Corps after, 3 weeks after. So I grew up in the service, and so I was shaped by a lot of the men and women that I interacted with through that time frame. And then the third is really leadership. And it's like leadership through allegory, rather than thinking practical leadership that I learned along the way, over 21 years in the service. For me, I didn't want to write a book that was saying you need to do these 3 things to be a good leader. It was more along the lines of wanting to write stories that could relate, that everyday people or military people could relate with these scenarios, and then kind of extrapolate somewhat what they wanted from those leadership scenarios. But also there's a ton of like self-reflection of me as I grew to be. I mean, you don't start off as a good leader. You make a ton of mistakes. And it was kind of me corralling my way through that process to make sure, that I was wanting to be able to bring readers along on the journey that I went through. And at the end of it, all of it, and why Harnessing Hidden Potential is the subtitle. And, there's a second question about the title of the book is it's a dark horse. I'm a dark horse. I was not, I wasn't the strongest. I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't whatever, people told you were. And my success, I believe, came from other people. They saw something in me that I did myself at that time frame. And so their belief in me allowed me to gain the same thing. And so at the very end, what we try to do is wrap this thing around, is turning around at the end of my career and trying to shape the next generation so that they can have their own potential, kind of, flipping the script, if you will, right? And trying to make something a little bit more, I would say positive outlook for the next generation. All right. Hopefully, Gina. And so, okay. Let me get through the, okay, Sam, thanks so much. The book is organized, so it's actually chronologically. So this is a very linear journey that takes me, or takes the reader, through kind of my life. And we tried something very fun through it, is the writing kind of shifts. And Neil and I made some pretty distinct decisions on this. In the beginning of the book, the writing is not, dare I say, like adolescent, but it is a little shorter, a little choppier, a little less put together, for 2 reasons. One is I was finding my footing as a writer and getting a little bit more to go along. But 2, we left it kind of that way because what we wanted to do was show, I think, a little bit of that's what people of that age kind of feel. They don't know what's going on in the world. They don't know where they're going to be, who they're going to be, what that looks like. There's a ton of like self-confidence issues that people suffer from. And so I'm kind of writing that way as we go through it. And then as we start to progress through the book, we start moving further and further on down a chain of understanding, self-reflection, a little better ideation, and then an ability to, be a perpetual student and try to learn as you go. And so that's what we take you through the book, all the way from the day I step on the yellow footprints in boot camp, all the way to when we retire, and then move on from that. So hopefully that answers your question, Sam. Thank you so much for that. Oh, Maria, good one. What made me decide to write the story? Well, we covered a little bit of that with Ryan Fugit. It seems so hard to write a memoir, right? I don't want to tell the world like, you're welcome, I won the war on terrorism. That's not what this is about. But what I found was that through a lot of connection and a lot of conversation with Marines that I've served with, was that, and even as now the host of Combat Story, is that people want to feel valued and they want to feel seen and heard, right? That our human existence matters. And so I thought about the men and women that I served alongside and how they impacted me, and how dare I not write about them, right? And how they changed, my life. Essentially, Darkhorse is a love letter. It's a love letter to the people who have shaped my life, who have given me something that I didn't think that I would have possible. And then really a call to action to turn around and say to the next generation, we're looking for you, we're waiting on you. And for the leaders of today is to make the next generation better than you, if that makes sense. And why is this the right time to tell my story? Well, I had a lot of personal grief. I retired from the military. There was a lot of like ego death that kind of happened in there. But I think that we got to a point of where place. And that's really what we tried to Darkhorse. Neil and I sat hours on the phone, was how do we take something that's predominantly not necessarily negative, but war is not a positive function, right? War is not a good thing that people should want for. How do we take this and turn this into something positive when, I'm a human being too, just like the rest of the world is. I'm affected by what's going on all over the place all the time. And so maybe we could try to write something good, right? A little, I'll caveat this, excuse me, I will carry this into Jason's question about my appreciate for my experience is, snipers is very hard. One of the things that I don't like being asked, right, is people, whether or not they mean it or they understand it, is they try to quantify like, what's your, how many people have you shot, right? I've never really looked at it that way. And I don't actually think it's a very appropriate question to ask people. But what I see in that is I see that the way that I saw myself as a sniper was not as somebody who was going to eliminate a target specifically for a negative purpose. I tried to be a protector. I had a weapon system. I had a tool through skills and training in schools to try to protect people, regardless of the reasons why we went to conflict or whether war should exist in the first place. At the end of the day, to me, it was about service. As I had a skill set that I wanted to be able to serve my brethren. And what I appreciate about my experience in the Marines was that I was taught that. That's a learned thing, is to be able to understand and want to help as many people as possible through your service. That's what service is, right? And so kind of a call to action as well. Bear with me. I'm going to thank you so much. I really do appreciate all the questions. So Victoria, that's a tough one. How did writing the memoir change how I viewed my own experiences? Well, it was really tough. So I made a decision, Neil and I talked a lot, and we made a pretty conscious decision to not work very hard on being authentic, right? How do you write that? So how do you judge, or you compare between trying to write something that people will ultimately want to buy and want to read? So there has to be action, it has to be compelling, there has to be this kind of page turning reality to it, but at the same time be my self-deprecating self, right? My own way of trying to get through the world by not trying to be the toughest guy in the room or the biggest guy or the smartest guy or whatever it is, and try to have that almost like humility. How do you write a memoir with humility? Like, that is one of the biggest struggles that I've had, because it's effectively an oxymoron. So for me, it was a chance for some heavy self-reflection. Through the book, what I've done is I've written letters and I've included letters that I've written through my life. Excuse me. When I was a kid, when I was a Marine, I didn't write a lot of letters home that were like, "Hey mom, chow is good, my feet smell," things like that. Excuse me. What I tried to write were stories. I wanted to be able to capture what life was like on a really like cerebral kind of sense. And so in a way, Neil and I had a conversation, and he was like, "Man, you've been writing this book for 20 years." Because I have included letters from when I was in boot camp and a scared recruit questioning my own decision to join the Marine Corps, all the way to the very final page of the book. It's called Letter to the Leader, and it is my personal letter to any potential future leader who is looking for guidance, and to me, what a effective roadmap for leadership would be. But I had to go through a ton of self-reflection and a ton of looking myself in the mirror and explaining, how do I want to tell this story? How do I want to tell this story of hunting down Iraq's deadliest sniper, but never taking the credit for it, but now taking the credit for it, right? How do you do that without sounding like a complete, narcissist? And we worked really, really hard on that, because that was never about me. It was always about the team and about returning that thing back to the Marine Corps. But we do take you through those journeys. It is a leadership book. It is a book about combat. We do take you through those journeys in vivid detail. Now, I'm not gory in the details. I wanted to make this accessible. I wanted people of all ages to be able to read this book and really feel what it was like to be a United States Marine in the global war on terror, and grow with me as I grew in the service. So, so Sasha, good question. What's the biggest takeaway from this book? My publisher is going to hate this, right? But I love it. Is I joke with people and they're like, well, it's like, what's the book about, right? I get that a lot. Well, the book's we've talked about how it's a love letter, right? I tell people, go to the last page. It's kind of a thank you, right? Go to the last page of the book and read Letter to the Leader. That will tell you everything that I've learned over 21 years of service in all over, service all over the service. And so if you want to learn what I've learned with it, like a TLDR, right? What I've learned over 21 years, it's in there. It's a personal letter to a future leader. If you want, that's in the book. And you're going to have to go along that journey with me through that book to be able to say, when you read that, oh, okay, now I understand. It's really a call to action, to people, and like it's a tough world out there, and it's going to continue to be tough. And the idea of saying that I didn't get to where I was because I did it all on my own, I did it because of other people. We're going to need each other. We're going to need each other through this entire. It's that we all have this potential to be great, and all have this potential that we may not even see in ourselves. Okay, so Samantha, yeah, how I got involved with Combat Story, great question. Ryan, again, I owe that man a lot. Him and I started talking in 2025 around April timeframe. He had mentioned that he was looking to, he has a lot of other, things going on in life, career man, family man, and running a podcast is a lot of work. So myself and my partner Sarah, we do the whole thing. We have an editor that we use, and it is an awful lot of work. And so Ryan recognized that, and he said he had done it for 5 years and he was looking to transition it. And he and I had grown to become friends, first through the interview, and then after we in the interview in the book process. And so he asked me to take it, and I was my first answer was no. I have no desire to get in front of a camera and and sit and try to make it about myself. And he says, no, that's not the point at all. It's that there's 2 microphones, and you get to sit with a service member in the same room who's walked similar paths and just ask them a simple question: what happened out there? And then provide that space for people to feel seen, feel lived, feel heard. And it has been an incredible journey since. And I've met a ton of amazing people of service from all branches, military, law enforcement, first responder. My hat's off to those men and women that choose to do that, because they choose to live a life for others. And that, to me, is a message worth broadcasting. So Ty, I feel you. Oh, sir, never seen this channel. How many tours did you do? I did. So difference in generation type stuff, a 1 or 2 tour, and that generally meant 13 months. Army and Marine Corps had differing deployment timeframes. That carries over into this modern generation, sort of. I did 7 international deployments. 4 of them were combat deployments, but I need to say that Marines do different length combat deployments than our brothers in the Army. They do 12 to 13. We do anywhere from 6 to 9. So I had 3 tours to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan, and then 1 to the Africa region. And then I did 2 deployments to Okinawa, Japan, and the Pacific Rim. All right, Robert. Oh, dude, Robert, good question. What chapter was most emotional? Oh, God, well, there was a sub chapter. I think the chapter is called "The Worst Day of My Life." I can't ever talk about it and not get choked up. But it was about losing, and the whole book is dedicated to my friend, Matt Ingham, Staff Sergeant Matt Ingham. God, you guys are getting just me in here, and I'm getting all teary-eyed. All right, so a very long story short, we were in Afghanistan together, and he was a team leader with me. I was in charge of Team 1, and he was in charge of Team 2. And he was put in a no-win scenario, as was I. So when I had to write that chapter, I had to go away. I did a lot of my writing here at the beach in California and San Diego, and I did a lot of my writing in the desert. And so I went to Anza Borrego, if you're familiar with Walden, right? So I think it was Thoreau, if I'm not mistaken, would go to his Walden, his place of peace, and that's where he would write. And so I called it my West Coast Walden, is I would go to the desert, and I found this little bed and breakfast in the middle of nowhere with no occupants. I mean, it wasn't like a slasher motel or anything like that. It was, like had like a continental breakfast there in the desert, and I just wrote and wept and walked in the desert by myself just to be able to get this stuff out there. Because, to the question previous, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of what ifs, what could I have done better? What could I have done differently? Was there any way out of this thing? And then trying to do honor for my best friend. Am I streaming on Twitch, Kick? Can't see the questions you're answering. Oh, I'm so sorry. Brent, I appreciate it. I'll respond with the questions in there. I think Twitch, if I'm not mistaken, that might be a gaming thing. I am an avid video gamer. So yeah, I don't know, but I've may have watched some Twitch streams in my day. But anyway, so no, to answer your question, we're not. So what does being a dark horse to me mean personally? This is from Chandra. Great question. I think that being a horse, rather than being, a word people kind of throw out as some template design, I think being a dark horse is, in the book, I write about, some colleagues of mine that were shaping me. One of the things they told me to do was write what I wanted most in the world with a marker on my mirror. So every single day I would visualize success. And I would visualize what I wanted most in the world. And we were also comparing that to a trajectory. So to answer your question directly, I believe life is a lot about trajectory, especially as a sniper. I understand the math behind it. The idea of being a dark horse is writing what you want most in the world at the end. Like, that's where I want to be. That's my goal. Graduate law school, whatever the thing is, put that goal at the end, and don't be afraid of having that. I wrote that I wanted to be a scout sniper more than anything in the world when I was in sniper school. And that made me focus. Every day when I shaved my little face, I was focusing on that one thing. And so that visualization turned into, walk that backwards. What steps do I need to take to realize that? Bring your own hidden potential by writing what you want to be most, and then saying, okay, and allowing yourself to believe in that, allowing yourself to follow that dream. Chandra, again, great question. Your story sounds incredibly powerful. Was there one moment during military career that completely changed how you viewed leadership? Yes. So there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot. And gosh, it's so the way that I think is, like, it's very hard for me when I read a lot of leadership books, because a lot of leadership books are very, like, over-explanatory, or they're just like, I don't know, just be a good dude. And you're like, all right, I mean, I guess, but I might need some things. The way that I look at leadership is, if anyone remembers, like, bowling alleys, right? And like going to a bowling alley as a kid and putting bumpers up, right? So there is some times is that as a leadership journey, you kind of bounce around, but you try not to fall off the edges. And if you have a good team around you, they provide support. One of my most, I would say, and I write about it, but one of my most, I would say, not embarrassing, but your look yourself in the mirror kind of moments was in Aachen, and I was a Force Recon team leader. And if people don't know what Force Recon is, we joke a lot, and we say that we're like the Kirkland brand Navy SEALs, right? Maybe I say that and everybody else hates it, but we do the same thing, the same job, all of those types of missions. We don't hate SEALs. We grew up with them, right? It's part of the same mission. We just don't work for SOCOM. What we do is we work for the Marine Corps. And so I was in Aqaba, Jordan with a Force Recon team, and these are really, really experienced guys and really, really very tough men. And I was their leader, and I was failing them. And they called a team meeting. And a team meeting, generally, when we have kind of a family meeting, the way that I led was a family meeting, was kind of a Knights of the Round Table thing, where we sit down and we have a conversation with one another, and we take our rank off. And that's a very vulnerable place for people to be, especially in an institution that has a very rigid hierarchy. And so one of the things that I, through allegory, try to infer is that you should be receptive as a leader to taking your rank off. to saying, hey, listen, I'm just AJ in this conversation. Let's make this thing do that. Nobody misconstrued whether or not I was the leader, but you kind of have to earn it as a leader as well. And so these men sat me down, and for a long period of time, a couple hours, we sat in the Aqaba Desert as the sun was setting, and they had explained every single moment where I had cut them off at their knees. So this is after I had lost Matt in Afghanistan. And so for me, I felt as a leader that having control meant controlling all the variables and all the risk. But what I was doing was I was suffocating my team. I had 5 additional force reconnaissance Marines underneath my charge who were as capable, if not more capable, than I was. And my leadership style was suffocating them. And so the thing that I needed to do was learn to let go. And they needed to tell me that. But the only reason they told me that, instead of writing me off, was because I treated them with dignity. I treated them with humility and respect. And I understood them as people. And lesson inferred through this is, like, if I was a jerk to these, they would have let me sink. The bumpers wouldn't have been there. So it's kind of a push-pull relationship with leadership and their followers or the people they lead. If you're a tyrant, your team won't provide the bumpers, right? If you are at least a just or a kind or a good leader, they'll help correct you and get you back on track. And so that was the moment I think that really shaped. And there's a ton more in the book as well. So Blake, I'm curious, how did you build trust in a team operating under extreme stress? That's really tough. There's kind of, okay, so I actually think in some cases it's easier, in some cases it's harder. I think it's easier because the threat is present. The threat isn't like a quarterly profit margin that has this nebulous future. The threat is, if we don't get this together and solve this right now, people get hurt. And so there is this a sort of like bias for wanting to come together as a team and looking for that. We know that each other or whatever it is, and then we'll come back immediately. All right, I'm really sorry about that. We have to get that. There is a mission. In a way, have the luxury of extreme stress, if that makes sense, like, iron sharpens iron kind of thing. But I think that there's this understanding of this willingness to work together. We know that oftentimes the only thing that we have to help survive this scenario is each other. And so there's this kind of bias towards that. Stress rears itself in a lot of ways. And what it does is it shows the cracks in your organization. And so if there's a stressful moment happening and 2 people are screaming at each other, or you guys are pontificating forever and ever and ever, and risk seems to be the thing that leads, any decision, needs to be time for some kind of Knights of the Round Table conversations. I do appreciate the question, Blake. Laura, great question. The book mentions redefining masculinity through empathy and compassion. What is difficult to embrace those qualities in such a high pressure environment? I appreciate that. So, one of the things that I say is that, courage is useless without compassion. I think that, my own personal beliefs is, I'm not trying to soapbox too much, but my own personal beliefs, I think that there's a lot of people that have been led astray on what masculinity is. And I think that some people have co-opted that narrative, that thinking that masculinity is cruelty, and that it is not. Masculinity to me is understanding that, is a respect for respect kind of environment. It's working and recognizing that other people have their own agency and who they are, what they want to be. And I've found, throughout my career, that if I just look and have a conversation with somebody and recognize them as a very important person in the world, and I see them eye to eye, that is the definition of empathy. I'm trying to walk in their shoes, right? I have compassion for them. But, some of the most courage, and I say courage is useless without compassion, because courage isn't why we kick down a door when we know there's bad guys on the other. Courage isn't the reason why a Marine will sacrifice his life, jump on a hand grenade of Marines, which we have a Medal of Honor recipient in the Marines for that. That's not courage. That's compassion. right? He cares for his Marines, his brothers and sisters in arms, more than he does his own self. And he is willing to give his life so that they may have a better opportunity for success. If you can lead as a man, as a woman, whatever it is, like lead, with masculinity in this place of saying, I care about your success. Masculinity is, to me, is not being about how many pull-ups you can do or how fast you can do whatever, or how, to me, it's how you treat people, right? Are you personally accountable to your actions, anything that you do or fail to do? Are you compassionate with others? Do you treat other people with dignity and respect? That's masculinity to me. And so luckily we have this kind of forum where I was a force recon scout sniper, right? Like I checked the box on masculinity stuff, right? So now I have a way to talk about what it's really like in these teams. Yes, these are tough men. We call them snake eaters, right? These are I'm glad they're on our side kind of men, but they also love each other a lot. We use the term love and I love you, brother, more than people would actually recognize. So thanks for your question, Laura. I appreciate it. So Blake, great question again. You write about failure helping build grit. Was there a failure in life that becoming one of your greatest lessons? Yeah. I was talking with my old platoon sergeant yesterday, as a matter of fact. I got kicked out of the sniper platoon when I was a corporal, a lance corporal, so an E3. I got kicked out of the sniper platoon because I wasn't up to task. I wasn't holding my end of the bargain. I was failing in every measurable metric that they had. And through a very weird circumstances and fortunate turn of events, I was allowed the opportunity to come back into the platoon on a probationary status. So like part of this like masculinity, part of this Darkhorse thing is like right now we're all talking to each other while I'm just yammering on to you guys about masculinity or whatever. If you were to look at me and look at the book behind me and what I've accomplished, you'd be like, yo, dude, this guy's been successful his entire life. He's never struggled or doubted anything. I'm nothing like him. That couldn't be further from the truth. I have a bathroom next to me. Before I came to this live interview, I literally did the Ted Lasso thing and like yelled in the mirror because I was nervous before coming on this phone call because it's the internet, right? And I don't know what the internet has in store. So even now, I try to tell people, and I show all my failures along the way to show people that failure is part of growing. Grit comes from failure. So the fear of failure and not acting on fear is the greatest thing, misstep that we can make. And so for me, getting kicked out of the sniper platoon made me realize how much I wanted it. And when I got back in, out of luck, I had to earn it. And I knew for the rest of my life that if I continued on with that sort of passion, then I would be successful no matter what I tried. And really, at the end of the day, I was told by a good mentor of mine, not failing, you're not growing. And so it's seek that. And so I do appreciate your Blake. Thank you so much. Robert here. So for someone who's never served, so Robert asked, for someone who's never served in the military, what do you hope to take away from Darkhorse? Good question. I really hope people take the idea of service away. I mean, the joke, kind of the trope that I use is putting your shopping carts back. Like if people are like, what could you solve with one thing in the book? I'm like, I just want people to put their shopping carts back, man. Like at the end of the day, we're not in this world alone. We didn't get here alone. Wherever we end up is not going to be alone. It's because of other people. For me, that's what I believe in part of my journey. So my debt to them is to live a life of saying, I recognize I'm not the only person in the world, right? So I want to make other people's lives better. To me, the idea of putting your shopping cart back, that only takes time out of your day. It only costs you calories as you're taking the shopping cart from your car back to the little, trough or whatever it is that it goes. But what you're showing humanity is that you realize that you're trying to make someone else's life a little bit easier by sacrificing 4 to 5 seconds of your own day. And at the end of the day, it's like the shopping cart guy or gal that's running around the place, like just be a little nicer to him, right? So how that really ties to the book, right, is this, idea of turning around and making the next generation better. That's really what it is for me. I won't give you the last line of the book because I was quite proud of it, but the last line of the book is really epitomizes what I think that we can, do for one another. And this crosses military, it crosses civilian. Is if you as a leader, if you as a person just want to be able to look after other people as you would want them to look after you, then I think that we're going to be in a little bit better shape. So let me grab a little cup of coffee here. Excuse me. If you're watching on TalkShop Live, make sure to hit the shop button and receive a signed copy from me. All right, Bobby. Did this book back? So Bobby asked, did writing this book, I can read apparently, did writing this book bring back difficult memories from your deployments, or was it healing for you? So the answer is yes, to both. It was extremely hard to go back through things. I listened to, a lot of like very cerebral type music, some like, honestly, a lot of Hans Zimmer from like the Interstellar soundtrack was my jam. So when I'm writing, I remember Sarah walked in on me, right? And so I was writing in a dark room, right? And I had headphones on max blast, listening to Interstellar soundtrack, writing about combat in Fallujah. And it was I had chicken skin. It was visceral. I was there and I was bleeding on the page. I was like snot crying when I was writing some of this because it was the feelings, the emotions were just, I hadn't felt them since I was there. I had really stepped back into those absolute fear of death, but it was its own form of therapy because I wrote all of these things down. I faced those demons. I stood in the breach with those demons again, and I captured them and I wrote them down so that other people could learn from them and maybe learn what combat is actually like, what fear of death is actually like. Excuse me. I don't like to glorify combat. I don't at all. I don't. And I don't wish it on anybody. And so maybe, just maybe, if we could show the world what really goes through young men's and young women's minds when they're at the breach and they're staring death in the face, maybe we'll be a little bit more cautious about whether or not we want to, continue with that. So it was very healing. And now I'm in a space where I just feel like I've let 20 years of, not baggage in a negative sense, but 20 years of weight, I wrote it on the pages, and I hope you enjoy reading it. If you're also watching on Facebook or Instagram, comment the word shop to receive a link to your DMs and purchase a signed copy. Emily, dude, I feel that's a good question. What was harder, combat missions or trying to change the Marine Corps training system from within? The latter. My goodness, but just because you love something doesn't mean that you can't want to make it better, or you can't look at it and go, there's some things we need to change. Working to change the system is very hard. We as a country often fall into the trap of preparing for the next war by making sure we've won the last one, if that makes sense, by practicing how we won the last one or how we worked in the last one. And so there's a lot of conversations that were on successes and how we didn't, how we had a lot of tactical advantages and how great we were as a service. But those accolades, don't mean anything in the next war. And whether or not I think that we should go or what that looks like or where these places going to be, where we're going to fight next, at the end of the day, a young Marine, whether or not we want it to or not, a young Marine and their rifle will be on some foreign shore charging towards the enemy, trying to be able to, carry American values, if you will, forward. And so wanting to change that, regardless of what we thought about it, we wanted to be able to change that, give them the best chance of success. So we had to deal with a lot of egos, and that's fine. Everybody has an ego, and we understand that. And a lot of looking at our past successes. And that was very hard to divorce those. So to answer your question directly, the second was the hardest thing for me, because also I didn't want to devalue anyone else's service and what they saw through their own journey. So sometimes when an organization is looking to the future, we have to rely on past successes. But when we look to try to change the future or change education, we are not devaluing past successes. We're not saying that those sacrifices and those journeys were not, real or authentic or mattered. We're trying to adapt to the future. And I think that's where we need to continue to go. Melissa writes, "Hey AJ, I haven't read the book yet, but it sounds like leadership is a huge. What makes someone a leader in your opinion?" I got to do my plug, right? The Great Leader, back of the book, last page of the book, Letter to the Leader. That is me telling you how to be a good leader and everything I've learned over 21 years. At the end of the day, and I don't want to give a platitude, but if you, what has benefited me as a leader is if I walk into a room and I work with people that, let's say, they're subordinate to me, and I want to be able to ensure their own success, to allow them their own level of success, whatever that is. I have their best interests in mind, no matter the industry. If I have their best interests in mind and want to allow them to grow and adapt and show their skills and have individual agency and individual autonomy, giving those as a leader, regardless of the missteps you make, those people will recognize that you care about them. And if you care about the people that you work for as a leader, not the other way around, that you work for as them, then they'll forgive a lot of things and then also be open to feedback. Sometimes the is to ask them. And I found that solves a lot more problems than I wished along my career. So Lisa writes, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you spelled his name right. That's impressive. Called the book an example of true strength. What did it feel like hearing that kind of praise for him? Well, it was kind of surreal. Like he's the dude we all grew up watching, right? Like Predator, right? How many times I've quoted Predator, in my life, right? Or Commando. No, or Terminator, but sort of Terminator, but so I think military-centric movies, right? But that was what I wanted to be as a kid. John J. Rambo with Sylvester Stallone, like First Blood Part 2. Like my mom was not too happy I was watching those movies as a kid. But that kind of praise. So I think that what Arnold has done is he epitomizes what I believe is to be the American dream. He came to the United States, with nothing in his pocket, and he was able to realize his own success and realize his own potential. And when I say other people are responsible for my success, I completely 100% believe that. However, there's this token that you have to realize that you have to work for it. People gave me chances and I had to earn them. I had to respect them by earning that chance. And so when I saw Arnold do that through his life, from everything that he did, from transitioning from a successful, actor to becoming the governor of California and now an advocate, later on, an advocate for peace, right? Later on, I look at that man and I say, what? He just keeps setting a new standard for himself. Maybe he writes it on, his bathroom mirror, but he sets his own trajectory and he's not afraid to go at it. And so I think that's really, really powerful. And again, from having the governor, right, say like my book, is an example of true strength. I don't know that I can lift as much as him, but I do feel very honored that he says that I can carry as much weight as him. And that means the world. Semper Fi, Devil Dog from Staten Island, New York City, our New York friends. I actually have a couple of references to New York, to New Yorkers in the book who made fun of soft-assed Californians from that as well. Okay, so Jordan asks, excited to read the book. You enlisted at 17, just after 9/11. Looking back now, what would you say to the younger version of yourself? Dude, Jordan, good question. So here's something I was talking, I mentor some people along the way and some friends of mine and colleagues that we work with, is he has this incredible journey that he's gone through, and I'm pressuring him to write his own book, and I won't give his name, right now. But he was talking about how nervous he was for the next steps that he was going to take. And one of the things that I told him was, I said, hey, dude, do yourself a favor. I know that we always talk about visualizing, we talk about looking in the future and trying to become that thing in the future, but what if you just pause for a moment and just look in the rearview mirror just for a second and look back to your 10-year-old self. And if you look back at your 10-year-old self, would he or she be at today? And the answer to a lot of people is yes. And if the answer is no, then change some things. So when I look back to what I would say to the younger version of myself was, gosh, give yourself a little bit more credit. But I don't know. I mean, maybe the chip on my shoulder, maybe this idea of being a dark horse or the idea of being less than was kind of a superpower, right? I wasn't given everything in life, and a lot of people aren't. And so maybe that kind of, iron sharpens iron, right? It's a tough one to kind of go back. My pre 9/11, I had a ponytail. I was younger when I had a ponytail, I had a mullet, so I'd tell him to cut that dumb thing. That's what I would tell him. I appreciate it, Jordan. Thank you. Oh, Trevor, this is the toughest question here. Was there one teammate, mentor, or fellow Marine who had a major impact on the person you became? No, there wasn't one. There were dozens. There were dozens of people, and I wrote all of their names in the book. This book is a thank you. This book is a love letter to them, to say, you have changed my life. That's inspiration for other people to want to do the same to others, then I'm okay. Gunny Jackson was the first person who saw me for something that I could be rather than what I was. And that man has fundamentally altered the entire trajectory of my life. Born into the depths of poverty in southern Georgia, and had to fight his way out of that. Became a United States Marine and one of the scariest men I've ever met in my entire life. I emailed him yesterday, and I'm sending him a copy of the book. And so what I want to tell Gunny Jackson, the first person to ever affect my life in that capacity inside of the Marines, thank you. You changed everything. Kyle K. Hello. After everything you've experienced, what keeps you motivated today, and what challenge are you still trying to conquer next? Well, motivated is, I'm a human being like the rest of us. And like I mentioned earlier, I know there's a lot of negativity in the world right now. I live it. I'm a human being living in the United States that sees the same things. Hope for the future is not naivety, right? Or naivete, right? Hope for the future to be a little bit brighter, I think, is a super. What I try to do is when I feel down or I feel depressed or I feel hopeless, I try to imagine a different world, and a world where we can respect one another, where we can work for one another instead of against one another, where listening can replace shouting. I hope for a world like that. And sometimes what I try to do is act, and you act in your own way on each and every single day. Sometimes it's just putting a shopping cart back. Sometimes it's writing a book about hope. And it's writing a book about trying to make the next generation better than you, or what you've learned through the service. Because, what I try to do in the book and what we do on Combat Story is it's our little corner of the internet. And we're just trying to make the world a little bit better place by showing service as a value. So thanks, Cal. I appreciate it. So Zoe, you write, courage is useless without compassion. What experience taught you that most clearly? Greg Rund, Lance Corporal Gregory Rund showed me that. I detail his story as close as I can while I was in Fallujah. Greg Rund was the smile of India Company, and he was a 21-year-old Marine in Fallujah, and there was a Marine trapped inside of a house with some bad people inside of it. And there was a really no-win scenario. And Greg had to make a choice. And so that's where I've defined courage was useless without compassion. Greg went into the home to be able to protect a young Marine and establish a base of fire so that the rest of his fire team and his squad could enter in the home. And he gave his life doing so. And that, to me, is a legacy worth remembering. And that's why I want to be able to continue saying his name. Part of this book is writing their names down so that they and their families can live on, and knowing that their sacrifices and their courage and their compassion weren't forgotten. Thanks, Zoe. Ren, was there a moment in combat where you realized toughness alone was not enough? Yeah. A lot. So toughness is hard very differently. I mean, look at Olympic athletes. They're different body shapes and sizes, and they're different expertises. A javelin thrower can't be good at being a sprinter, right? Or maybe, I don't know. Whatever, a bobsled, I don't know. I'm not going to try a reference here. But the idea is saying is that toughness comes in different forms. I think that you have to have a little bit of staying power with toughness. Is anybody can be tough for a couple of seconds. Anybody can be tough for a couple of minutes. But being on a reconnaissance patrol in the northern or the southern Hindu Kush mountain range, 0 degrees with sleet, rain falling in your face for 12 hours of a movement, that requires more than toughness. That's perseverance, right? That's understanding, that's responsibility. As the team leader, I couldn't stop. I couldn't take a knee. I couldn't give up, throw my hands up, because my team was counting on me. And our reconnaissance mission was to be able to provide direct information to support another organization who was conducting a raid the next morning. Toughness for me is a shared responsibility. Yeah, it comes from inside, but I always found the idea of duty to someone else as the reason for my toughness and for, kind of perseverance. So was Iraq in 07, 0.2. Iraq got a little confusing at the time frame. I know that I was in OIF 1. I know that I was in OIF 2. And then I was in Iraq in 2006 from January to July. That may have crossed the 07.2, but I couldn't really keep track anymore. But I do understand what you're talking about. So Victoria asks, why do some people become dark horses under pressure while others collapse? Very good question. So I think that I'm an advocate, right? And I did this with education, is that I wanted to be able to have people realize their own potential and being able to create a system that inculcates that. I think that there's a lot of times is that what I showed through my journey was that, toughness or becoming a dark horse it's not a decision that happens overnight. It's something that has to be learned over time. And so and part of my PhD research that I'm doing now is like learning pathology. How do we create cultures and systems and organizations that allows people come into their own, to have their own idea of self-efficacy, right? Their own idea of agency. And so sometimes people, have a chip on their shoulder or whatever it may be and become dark horses in spite of the system. Some people become those because of the system. And then really sometimes it's because people believe in them. And that's what I wanted to be able to capture in this book. High Peak Event Company with you. I appreciate that. Thank you. So Mallory asks, you've led elite Marines in war. What leadership habits matter in life that civilians usually overlook? Yeah. Okay. So I read a lot on leadership books when I was trying to become a little bit better of a leader. And the challenge that I faced was there was a lot of academic leadership books and not a lot of practitioner leadership books. And so I felt that there was kind of a gap. Also, there were leadership books that I felt that were created for the creation of capital. And not for people in service organizations or that can run like a service organization. Our currency is not capital. Our currency is sacrifice. And so how do we make teams like that matter in a civilian section or a civilian sector? For me, I think it's this idea of really building teams that are successful and are looking out for one another. I understand the corporate world is sometimes competitive. It is sometimes built with, quarterly profit margins or very short-term goals. If you have goals that are collective, that are supportive of every single member of the team, that leadership habit will help make them feel realized. My partner, Sarah, worked in corporate leadership for a long time and was pretty burnt out by it. Because I think there's a lot of very transactional relationships inside of the corporate dimension, albeit because it may be a transactional industry. Well, what if a leadership, a habit that somebody had was they were transformational? What if you were on a team where you were the leader of a team that really worked to build and inculcate and cultivate that people, wanted to explore, set what success looks like and have your team allow them. And we do this a lot in the last third of the book. I'm showing you how to allow other team members to have their own agency, their own ability to create and provide to something. The worst thing that you can do as a leader is assume that rank equals competence, right? Or assume that the best decisions come from the top. Sorry, guys, I'm going through a couple of comments here. Got about 5 more minutes, and I'm also going to stay on for as long as anybody wants after this thing. So I can cruise on for a little bit more. Okay, so you describe a lot of different. Samantha asks, you describe a lot of different places that you were deployed. Is there anywhere that you would like to revisit? Yes, very much so. Mike Azad is a former United States Marine that I got a chance to interview on Combat Story. I would highly suggest that Mike Azad, that you go and watch his interview. As Ryan did with me when I started writing the book, he told me that I needed to write a book. I told Mike the same thing. So Mike is from northern Iraq, and he does sometimes get a chance to go back. One of the things that I liked about his story was he talked about how beautiful the country is right now. So I never got to see Iraq as beautiful. I got to see Iraq as war torn after years of whatever it was that we were doing over there, right? So I want to see it in a different light. Hopefully it becomes safe at some point that I can do so. But I'd like to see the community that we fought so hard to give democracy to. Now, I understand what happened and how everything went. There's some letters in there that I wrote in 2003 and 2004, and where I came to terms on what we were doing in Iraq and what we were doing in Fallujah. I wrote what's called a death letter. It's a letter you write to your families, if something should happen. And I included that in my in the book. As I mentioned, that I have letters all throughout the book. The thing to them was I understood that democracy we gave, and what I was hoping to give was Iraq the ability to decide their own future. And so with that, what we wanted to do was, for me, I think that, I kind of lost the plot on that one. So sorry. Revisit. Yeah. So to revisit, I would like to revisit Iraq. I'd like to see it as a tourist. I'd like to see what they've become through democracy and not a dictatorship, because I do think it was a beautiful culture and a beautiful people who, what I found at the end of Fallujah was that, it wasn't just an American dream, life, liberty, and pursuit. It was kind of a global dream. And I met a lot of good people in Iraq that I wouldn't have expected, who were family members, who just wanted their kids to go to a good school, who wanted their kids to grow up and play in a safe neighborhood. Their dreams are not so much different than our own. And so there was a lot humanizing that I would love to go back and revisit. So Danny asks, what part of military culture do you think helps men most, and what part hurts them? I think that for me, about how to be a man, and a lot about, I think being a good adult was like, yeah, there's some toughness to come along with there, right? There's you have to earn it, right? No one's giving you anything in the military, and that's what I appreciate about it. One of the things that I saw in Force Recon was that, we had a standard, and the standard, we say, was the standard. And the very first day that you showed up not able to do your job was the last day that you had that job. So you had to have this constant accountability. And it wasn't like, hey, I passed a thing one time and now I'm resting on my previous accolades. Remember, so this hunt for Juba, that we carry, the hunt for America's deadliest sniper adversary, I did that when I was 21 years old. I had another 15 years of a career. And people will tell you, and they can attest this, I never walked into a room talking about how badass I was, right? Or how I did X. Most people didn't know, because it didn't really matter. Because if I was just that guy who was always talking about that, like I was like Uncle Rico, right? Like living in the past, right? And I wanted to continue to be able to. So Amy asks, what did combat reveal about human nature and surprised me? I talk about, and again, I don't do a lot of gory details, right? But I do details. I take you through the very first time that I watched a man's eyes leave from his life. His life leave from his eyes, excuse me. And that's something that stays with you. But what I saw, and this was an enemy combatant, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't his country, it wasn't his race, it wasn't his religion. What I saw was fear. And I saw an unknown, right? Where he was going, what happened. And he looked at me with that fear in his eyes. And to me, I think that that has instilled a level of humanity, was if that enemy of mine at that moment, who was, taking his last breaths on earth, looked at me and looked at me with a fear, but not a fear of me, but that made me realize, it made me hate war. It made me hate it because he was just like me, from another place, from another time, born on a different side of the world and put into a position of where he had to face off against United. I was not, and I felt for him, and that's never left me. Fam Nova, excellent speaker, very intelligent and articulate. Apparently not, I can't read, intelligent and articulate. I appreciate that. Reading is apparently a challenge. Yeah, Alex, good one. How do you process taking lives while still holding on to your humanity? Well, okay, so I recently did an interview with Sean Ryan, and that Sean Ryan episode actually airs on Monday. And he asks the same question. And it was tough. Boy, it's tough. So in the book, you will see me struggle with this. You will see me struggle right before I'm pulling the trigger. I will tell you what's going through my mind. As snipers, I literally have, and I want the reader to breathe with me. I'm teaching you how to be a sniper in the book. I want you to breathe in with me. Exhale, right? And in those moments, I'm thinking about all before my eyes, right? Of what I am. Am I just a heartless killer? What am I doing? Am I in the right place? Whatever it may be. And then I have to pull the trigger, because if I don't pull the trigger, something else happens. I was able to, in my career, associate and recognize that at that moment they had made a decision to be in that position, and I had made a decision to be in mine. And I was the position of advantage. And so at that point, it became relatively binary. And so it was very hard to maintain my humanity through that. And I wrote about that a lot. And to that point, I delved into some pretty terrible things. I fell into addiction. I fell into alcoholism. And I write about that because I think that people need to write about their failures, to write about when they're falling to their knees, right? And they've lost their way. And I write about the people that brought me back up. And there were a number of Marines that stood by my side while I got myself together. And I will always remain a friend. So Chris asks, what movies and snipers get completely wrong? That we're not heartless killers, right? Like, we're normal people as well. But there is a binary at some level, right? So I have to be able to scan the world. The slow motion stuff does happen at times. Mostly it's, and I joke about it in some of mine, mostly it was like frantic, right? As I'm trying to figure out what the hell is going on. I think the clarity, I always say this, and this is and you guys I'm copywriting it today, right? Is clarity is the first casualty in combat. The thing that most movies get wrong is like seeing your bad guy, seeing your target, knowing what's happening. That's very rare. The other person doesn't want to die either, right? And so they're not trying to make it easy on us. And so that was, I think, one of the things that they get wrong. I will say this, a movie I did watch, I did not like the premise personally, but because I don't like the idea of advocating for a civil war in the United States, but the movie Civil War, I will give you a point. The audio in Civil War, specifically at the very end at the White House scene, their audio technicians got the sounds completely correct on what it sounds like. The thwack, the different drop of brass on carpet versus hardwood. So that's what I think people can get right. Jesse, you're very kind. Will I ever run for office again? I appreciate that. Running for office in San Jose was one of the highlights of my career and one of the honors of my life. Will I run for office again? I don't believe so. It was very hard on me. It was very hard on my family. And unfortunately, our political system does not allow for, I would say, mutual respect. So with that, yeah, I don't know. Probably not. Thank you, though. So Emily asks, what mattered more in those missions, technical skill, emotional control, or trust of my team? So the technical skill had to be there. That has to be a given. So we have a thing called, professional assumed competence, professional competence. When somebody comes into my room as a Force Reconnaissance Marine, they're a Force Reconnaissance Marine. I don't need to question their competence. The schools and our qualified them. If as the CMO or as a lead technician for whatever gizmo, just assume they know what they're talking about, right? And that for me was a big step up. Emotional control has to be there, right? There are moments where I've lost my cool and I joke about it and I laugh about it. I am human. Emotional control does not, so like anyone can tell you on this phone call, I am not a stoic, right? I try to be a stoic, right? Marcus Aurelius is one of my favorite authors. I've read Meditations like a bajillion times, right? But stoicism sometimes is hard for leaders because I think that for my style of leadership is I want to show that I love my teammates, that I care about them. Now, I'm not like their friend all the time. Like I hold them accountable, right? So trust in your team. But man, the thing that I think that's really strong as a leader is actually holding people accountable. I mean, not like firing everybody, but like having a conversation and be like, hey, one of the transition things that I've had after leaving the service is people are like, you're kind of abrupt with people. And I was like, I mean, you said you were going to do this. You didn't do this. I'm just stating that, right? So like, I have to learn a little bit of that as well. But I like to who yells at clouds, hold people accountable, right? I'm not yelling at children, right? But like sometimes just say, hey, man, you kind of messed that one up and we really relied on you on that. I did that yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I think it went okay. I think it's a respectful thing to do. Nadav Schreiber says, even after becoming a senior leader, how difficult was it to relate and connect with your junior enlisted Marines? Great question. I had a unique position as I was a gunner. I was both a infantry officer as well as a technical advisor. And so I got a chance I was a warrant officer, a chief warrant officer. So I got to kind of walk both worlds. With that for me was this idea of really trying to never forget where you come from. My specific role really related to the idea of saying, I am an advocate for them. So if you become a senior leader, one of the things that I see in corporate America all the time, my goodness, is the disconnect between senior management and the people that are actually doing the work. And that gap is a canyon between people. So, I think shoes, like one of my favorite TVs when I was deployed was always was like see how like the sandwich artist was doing their thing, right? And see what their life was like through that. That matters, right? That mattered as a leader. So I always took time to make sure that I was with the people that were suffering the most, because generally what happens is the people at the bottom suffer the most. And never, ever, ever, ever act like you're better than them, because I came from them. I was one of them. And so I actually write about that a lot in the book, specifically when I have to make the transition. In 2017, I transitioned from enlisted to officer. And that's a very different makeup of what you're supposed to do, what your roles are. So I ensured, and I wrote about it a ton as my observations as an officer watching enlisted now. My observations through that were carried out pretty heavily in the latter, I would say, third of the book. Ants 4100, AJ is the man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I needed that because I'm super nervous. So Brent Simonson says, jump out, but you've got much better questions to answer now. Oh, thanks, Brent. Appreciate it. Okay, Jesse E. You and I went to high school together. You graduated 2 years before me, though. I just wanted to tell you that myself and 5 other schoolmates from Fremont all enlisted into the Marines. Thank you. He says, continues, I wanted to say thank you for your service. It motivated the 6 of us to join the Brotherhood and will forever be attached to your journey within our beloved Corps. Yet. Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate that. Fremont High. I do write about Fremont High School in the book. I talk about the roses in the front of the high school, and I embarrass myself through the entire journey. You're going to find out that I was a thespian in high school, and some of my other uncool things I did. So I think one of the funniest parts about the book is like I don't like Darkhorse, right? Like I never shot a gun really before I joined the Marine Corps. I did like a black powder rifle as a Boy Scout, right? But I joined the Marine Corps and become like a sniper. I didn't live like the snipers journey be. So I think it's kind of funny, and I think it's a way to show other people where you come from doesn't dictate where you end up. So I do appreciate that. Fugit, my man. All right, AJ, missing you, brother, and thank you for coming to so much to Combat Story. Question for you: why are the Marines so short? Oh, just joking. For the Marines forward deployed in the Gulf now, if you were still in uniform as a senior leader, what would you be telling them to prepare for some of their first timers? Yes. Wow, Ryan. So I'm actually sad that I took over the podcast because you're still asking some great questions, putting us on the spot. So the first timers, I think, is yes, there's the old trope of like never let down your brothers. I think it's basically to think critically, right? To think clearly, to advocate responsibly, and then know when to move. That I think as a leader is extremely poignant. If you can think critically about what's going on, not let emotion override your decision, right? Try to think clearly, right? Is what's happening around you. Try taking a picture, take a step back. I had to do that in a lot of gunfights, right? Step back and say, I need time to assess. And I write about that. I worked with, I can't say the name, but I worked with an agency overseas that a senior leader in that agency taught me what leadership looked like in that moment. There was a ton of stress going on, a ton of chaos was happening. And he literally turned off his radio for 4 minutes and said, I got to take some space. I got to come up with a plan. I'm in charge. I got to come up with a plan. I need space to do that. And then he came back on 4 minutes later and communicated clearly, advocated responsibly for, what he needed. And then he moved. And that's sometimes what you have to do. So that's what I would tell the young Marines going forward. I try not to give them a bunch of platitudes. Platitude, shout out to James Buffett. Oh, thanks. Already get to the chopper. So thanks, Kyle. Appreciate it. Okay, Kevin Harris. Yeah, Ryan Fugit's on the chat now, but he is no longer the host of podcasts of Combat Story. I am. We did an episode where I interview Ryan. I highly recommend you check it out. Oh yeah, Mark, good question. Okay, kind of a technical question. I get it. With the rise of cheap first-person view drones, are you aware of a change in tactics for the guys on the ground? I think a change of tactics for these young Marines anywhere really it's going to happen naturally. I think they're going to do that. I am very well aware of the Marine Corps' adaptation and their ability to do so. And they're doing really good things. At the end of the day, it's going to be a young Marine solving a complex problem. So as long as we create thinkers of the future, then we're not trying to teach them to solve problems. We're trying to make them problem solvers, right? So if we can make them a problem solver, they can find whatever the thing is, whether it be first-person drones or sharks with lasers, they will come to that. As long as we make sure that the 6 inches between their ears are trained and educated in a way that they will have a bias for action and decision. Jesse E. Oh God, we were in the school musical together. Dude, I'm losing all the cool points right now. Because you're right. So Eric Victorino, I remember making big mistakes while on your team, and the way you dealt with it was better than any team leader I've been with. Eric, my man, my love, that wasn't a big mistake. It was a mistake, and it was a mistake made with love. I think that as a leader, what you need to be able to do to decide and make when you are faced with a team member who screws up, I think the first thing you need to be able to do is decide between negligence and a mistake. Negligence is a conscious decision to do bad. A mistake is something that they messed up with good intentions. To me, the intent made all the difference. I'm not going to go into detail on it, but what you did was you tried to help me in the best way that you knew how. And you did it in a way that we were, as we talked about, wasn't aligned with our values. And that's perfectly okay. And so now what it is like, and I'll stop talking about the specific incidents. Those things happen, man. I have screwed up. If anyone in my life, when I screwed up and got kicked out of the sniper platoon, if they said, no, dude, we kicked that dude, we're not bringing him back in, I would not be here sitting talking with you. I would not be in this room. I would not have, done the things that I did and met the people that I did if someone didn't say, you know what, that was a mistake and not negligence. And so that mattered a lot to me. All right. So with that, I think what I'm going to do is I've got 163 people on the chat. That means a lot to me. I do appreciate that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play just for a second here while we wait for a few more questions to come through, or we wrap it up to you guys. Is I'm going to play a couple of videos. No one's seen these yet. These are the first trailers for the video. We have a third one that we're making today, as a matter of fact. But I'll show you one of the cooler ones. Here you go. So we'll take a look at the Darkhorse trailer number 2, a little more cinematic. And with that, you get to watch my weird reactions with it.
No contact forward about 4 miles. Roger.
Pasciuti, take the shot.
All right. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that little trailer with that. And so with that, I want to thank everyone for taking the time with Talk Shop Live. Please order the book today live through the specific channels on Instagram. What you'll need to do, bear with me, what you'll need to do is if you're on Talk Shop Live, click the shop button. If you are watching on Facebook, Instagram, comment the word shop for links to order. And if you're watching on YouTube, click the link in the description. And with that, bear with me, guys. I want to thank everyone. This was really, really fun. I'll hang out just for a couple of more seconds if there's anything else kind of going on, but you have really made my day. I was pretty certain that nobody would end up in this thing. And I'd be sitting here, yammering on and reading chapters to myself. But here is the book again. So you have it behind me. I can clearly, we've shown that I can't read very well sometimes. So here's the book, Darkhorse. We got a whole bunch of pictures in this thing as well. HarperCollins' leadership has been fantastic with ensuring that we have had no stone left unturned. There's little baby AJ as a sniper, 10-year-old with my Marine recruiter and all that kind of stuff going through it. Man, it has been great. I want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart for being so good through this podcast. I know the internet, I had a lot of fear. You guys have really helped to change that. So with that, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you around, and thank you for walking beside me. All right, Darkhorse comes out next Tuesday, so buy it up. All right, guys. Thanks, David. I appreciate it. Have a great night, everyone.
Yep.